Hey, what's up everybody? cmdrradix here, bringing you another episode of Transformers Lore. Today, we're going to take a look at an intriguing Cybertronian political entity known as the Cybertron Alliance. If someone who had never heard of Transformers asked you what Transformers was about, you'd probably say something along the lines of it being a story about alien robots who can transform into vehicles and whatnot. These robots eventually fall into two factions that go to war against one another, one side being the heroic Autobots and the other side being the evil Decepticons. And their war takes them to the planet Earth, where they must continue to war while avoiding contact with humanity, therefore relying on their disguises. However, throughout the history of the Transformers franchise, we've seen Autobots and Decepticons put aside their differences and work alongside one another, either against a common foe, such as the Cybertronian Armada we see at the end of the Transformers Armada cartoon, or working together upon the establishment of peace, such as the Republic of Cybertron in the IDW Hasbro universe. In the Japanese Generation 1 continuity of Primax 785.06 Alpha, a similar setup took place in the form of the Cybertron Alliance, and I'd like to spend some time talking about the history of this alliance. We know the story of the Transformers as a war between the Autobots under the command of Optimus Prime and the Decepticons under Megatron, but in the year 2035, things were a little bit different. Megatron, you see, had been taken out of action after Dark Nova's attack on the Autobots. Long story short, and indeed I hope to cover that story one day, Megatron had been nearly destroyed in battle with Star Convoy, an upgraded form of Optimus Prime. That incident took place in 2031, and the Decepticons eventually fell under the command of the mysterious Scrash. In 2035, Scrash had waged war with the Autobots on the planet Earth that dragged on into 2036, causing much destruction. I also want to cover this war in more detail another day. There is just so much to the Japanese G1 timeline. Optimus Prime was missing at this point, in search of Nucleon to help with Cybertron's energy crisis. Throughout Scrash's war, Megatron himself actually had been retrieved by the Decepticons, and he was placed under experimentation by one of Scrash's mysterious soldiers, none other than Straxus of Primax 984.0 Gamma, that is, the Marvel US continuity, who had entered the Japanese continuity after the Space Bridge mishap that happened in Transformers number 18. I covered that story in a really old Transformers lore episode, so if you want to refresh your mind on that incident, you can check that out. I'll leave a link in the description. Straxus kept Megatron, or well, Ultra Megatron, but that's another story, locked away in the Titan Metro Titan, where he was trying to brainwash and take control of the Emperor of Destruction. Nevertheless, the dormant Megatron's mind was strong enough to resist Straxus's attempts. Metro Titan was also defeated during the wars with Scrash, and Megatron was ultimately retrieved by the Autobots, around the same time Optimus Prime returned with the Nucleon to fuel Cybertron, albeit the energy caused Cybertronians to turn into Action Masters. With the Cybertronian energy crisis resolved and Scrash's Decepticons defeated, Optimus Prime sought a formal ending of the Autobot-Decepticon wars. In order to bring about this new age of peace and happiness, Prime was willing to seek the creation of a new status quo in which Autobots and Decepticons could work together. The Autobots had Megatron repaired through Nucleon, turning him into an Action Master in the process, with the help of the friendly Decepticon Kiloton. On his part, Megatron had his damaged sanity circuits repaired, and he, too, tired of war. Thus, Megatron and Optimus Prime agreed to an end to the war and the formation of the Cybertron Alliance, an alliance between Autobots and Decepticons which sought to see the two factions work together side by side and bring about a new generation of Cybertronians who know not war. Even the faction symbols of the Autobots and Decepticons were discarded, with a new Cybertron Alliance symbol being used across all Autobots and Decepticons. Megatron and Optimus Prime ruled this alliance jointly, and Megatron's leadership convinced many Decepticons to follow their leader into the future. However, this new age of peace was not to last. The first Cybertron Alliance was very short-lived, as the Decepticon Kiloton, who Megatron was quite fond of due to his kindness in repairing him, was dispatched to Earth as a peace envoy to humanity. While the Autobots and Decepticons had been optimistic about this alliance, Earth was not convinced, and were still on edge. After all, it hadn't been a full year since Crash's attacks on the planet. When Kiloton arrived on Earth, the humans decided that it was better to be safe than sorry, and opened fire without provocation, killing the Decepticon. Megatron later arrived to retrieve his fallen friend, heartbroken and in a state of rage. The Kiloton incident convinced Megatron that conquest, tyranny, and military might truly was the only way to keep Cybertronians safe. He began plans for an invasion of Earth which Optimus Prime strongly opposed. Ultimately, the first Cybertron Alliance fell apart, and the G2 War broke out, named after the so-called second-generation bodies of the Autobots and Decepticons adopted during the war, discarding their Action Master bodies for more combat-capable transformation abilities. For the purposes of this video, we will not be looking in detail at the events of the G2 War, or the arrival of Galvatron 2, or other events that transpired between the first Cybertron Alliance breaking down and the second Cybertron Alliance being established. But what I can say is that Megatron ended up going through a lot during this time period, losing the G2 War, being overthrown by Galvatron 2 from another universe, and ultimately, hearing about the Legends world populated by weaker Cybertronians, Megatron jumped universes into said universe, Jocus 514.31 Gamma. However, Megatron's plans to take over the weakling universe and steal its energy was foiled. Megatron remained in that universe for quite some time, and given the comedic hijinks that took place in that universe, Megatron's heart gradually began to soften in this world of peace. The Legends universe tends to have that effect. Eventually, however, in 2038, the Legends universe was destroyed, and Megatron helped to evacuate many of the inhabitants back to Primax 785.06 Alpha. Now back in his home universe, Megatron did not wish to return to the constant state of war, and was open to the re-establishment of the Cybertron Alliance. A series of crises postponed these plans, such as an attack by Unicron and the revival of the Legends world, but ultimately in 2039, Megatron and Optimus Prime formally established the second Cybertron Alliance. The second Cybertron Alliance was much sturdier than the first Cybertron Alliance, especially after it dealt with its first crisis, in the form of a resurgent Scrash in 2040, who was defeated by the Alliance. 10 years later, however, in 2050, the second Cybertron Alliance was put to the test when the Selector Rebellion took place. You see, the humans of Earth had begun to use energy from Unicron known as Engelmaw energy to develop sentient mechanical servants called Selectors, and the Selectors eventually rebelled against humanity. The Selectors approached the Cybertron Alliance for aid, and though Optimus Prime was hesitant, Megatron happily brought the Cybertron Alliance into the war against Earth, though this war was partly engineered by the machinations of the Quintessons. The corrupting effects of the Engelmaw energy took a toll on the Alliance, especially as Megatron would be driven mad due to the Engelmaw energy in his system. As a result of the Selector Rebellion and the conflict with the Quintessons, Earth was rendered uninhabitable, and Megatron was effectively MIA, having been... well, it's a long story that involves time traveling to a previous universe that existed in the space Primax 785.06 Alpha occupies before Primax 785.06 Alpha had came into being. We'll talk about that another day. What matters is, after 2050, the second Cybertron Alliance remained strong, though the Decepticon co-leader of the Alliance was no longer present, and Optimus Prime was effectively the sole leader, the supreme commander, if you will, of all Cybertronians. Thereby, Autobot power and influence in the Cybertron Alliance became disproportional and stronger than that of Decepticon power and influence. That being said, it wasn't as if humanity was going to be an issue to cause friction between the Autobots and Decepticons. Earth was uninhabitable, and the humans and Selectors went off to find a new home among the stars. The Cybertron Alliance erased all data on the planet Earth in their records. While we don't have the details about what happens next, we can start to piece things together since we know where this all goes. By the 24th century, 300 years or thereabouts after 2050, we know that Cybertron is inhabited by the descendants of the Autobots and Decepticons, known as the Maximals and Predacons, with the two factions existing in a sort of alliance in which the Maximals have disproportionate power and the Predacons have become a sort of second-class citizenry. The Maximals are under the control of the Council of Elders, ruling from the Council Citadel, while the Predacons, formerly the Predacon Alliance, are under the command of the Tripredacus Council, secretly scheming behind the scenes to get the upper hand over the Maximals. What we can piece together, dear viewer, is that the Second Cybertron Alliance, over time, may have gradually evolved into the status quo we see in the future setting of the Beast Wars cartoon. This means that it is possible that the ending of the Second Cybertron Alliance took place in the 24th century, when the Predacon Megatron returned from the past and unleashed a virus and conquered Cybertron with his army of Viacons, although we can't say this for certain, as there is a 300-year gap with little information future writers could develop. But, ladies and gentlemen, I'm interested in hearing what you think. How should the Autobot-Decepticon War end? In a Cybertron alliance like we see in the Japanese continuity? Or with total Autobot victory like we see in, say, the Unicron Trilogy cartoon? Could the uprising of the Predacon Megatron have been avoided if the Second Cybertron Alliance had sought a replacement for co-ruler Megatron to lead alongside Optimus Prime? Who could have taken the spot of Megatron and commanded enough respect out of enough Decepticons while standing side by side with Optimus Prime without the Autobot commander overshadowing him? Let me know in the comments below. And that's going to wrap up this episode of Transformers Lore. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. Follow me on social media. All links are in the description, and have a great day, ladies and gentlemen.